welcome to the Awaken Heart podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I am so excited to be here with you today.
I'm excited to have you here as well. And I love that you're coming from the southern part of the country, Charleston.
That's right. You're finally starting to cool down a little bit. So that's always such a welcome time of year.
The hot summers, I do
that's
declare.
Right. That's right. You do that quite well, actually.
And you came over from Wisconsin. And I was just saying before we started recording, my parents met at the university there. They've been married since 1958. Mm-hmm. And what is the name of that town? Oconomowoc. So that was based off of Indians, right? Because I know a lot of Michigan. I'm from Michigan, and a lot of, the names like Mackinac and like I can't Potawatomi. That's in Indiana. It's a very Indian influence. I love it. So got another Midwestern girl here. So she moved to the South, and I moved to the West, and now I'm in the Pacific Northwest. So without further ado, we have very excited for this conversation. And as you heard in the intro, I went over a little bit of what we're going to talk about and some of the things that are so important for women to really now step into, the truth of who they are and use, heal their past traumas and to really, shine the light for so many others that, leading the path for others to step into their greatness as well. And Jean has so many accreditations. I'm so her background is psychology. She's done Reiki. She's hosted retreats and quantum physics, which is like, oh my gosh, it's mind blowing, all that. So can you give a little more of your background so people can kind of get a feel of who you are?
Absolutely. I always say I came into this lifetime. I don't think I read the fine print before diving headfirst in. Because I was born into a lot of contrast, and I came in here as a sensitive kid, and I was born into a household full of abuse and toxicity. And so I developed particular belief systems about how the world worked based on that upbringing. And what I found throughout my earlier, life is I literally was continuing to draw in toxicity, narcissistic relationships based on what I believed about the world and how it functioned. So because I believed that men were abusive, of course, I would draw in abusive men, right? And so until I really started to analyze my belief systems and recognize that I was creating my world based on what I believed, and that I could do something different. I tell people I was basically a hot mess. I was that person always going through a lot of drama and chaos and turmoil and struggle and survival mode. I mean, it really, the word contrast is the best way I can describe my early life, because I've been striving since that moment of recognition that I was creating my reality, even though I hated what I had created. I thought, if I'm that powerful at creating something that I don't like, I can be just as powerful at creating what I do. So from that moment forward, I have been doing that. I have been continuing to unpack all the trauma, all the old stuff, all the baggage that doesn't fit, all the things that I didn't like about my experience, and filling in that newly opened space with things that align with me now. And I'm finding the process of evolution through that completely fascinating, because there's always more. There's always more that you can create. There's always more you can explore. There's always more you can get into. And so I developed my career around my complete obsession and fascination with inner work. And knowing that there is such depth there that you could never get bored in those places. And so I love to share that potential with other people and also help them move through the density and the heaviness and the limitations and all these things that people are living their lives in and day out that they're not liking. And I want to say to you, you don't have to stay there. You don't have to live that way. You can choose something different for yourself. And I love to show people how to do that.
Yes. And that's the thing, is a lot of people have these beliefs, and it might, it covers these layers, like, the analogy of a house with all its lights on. Every time you have a situation like a childhood trauma or an agreement you make that might not even be based in certain reality, your lights in your house go off. And so you might only be operating with one light in the attic, and it's about turning the lights back on, because you really start to realize that you are not necessarily these beliefs. It's not really who you are. Now, what was the catalyst for you? What was the final thing that made you say, oh my gosh, okay, I don't have to be this way? Because that takes a lot of courage to really, a lot of people have to bottom out in order to pull themselves up for the depths. And that's where a lot of the healing is you just come to the limit. You're like, I can't go on like this anymore. So what was that thing that pulled, like, that switch?
Yeah, I totally was not listening to my guidance system
Mm-hmm.
and completely hit a rock bottom.
Mm-hmm.
And after my divorce, I started dating again, and I ended up with this complete narcissistic psychic vampire.
Don't we all have one of those?
Yes,
They're such a great lesson.
Just the best teachers ever. So it was just such a dark time. And I literally, he was just like a siphon for my energy. And I would even wake up at night and he's like hovering over me. And I was like, what are you doing? He's like, just telling you how, he was literally, to the capacity that I work in the light, he works in the dark. Mm-hmm. And so when I was sleeping, when I was trying to rest and restore my energy, he literally was siphoning my energy off of me. And it was just very, very dark. And before I encountered this man, I was under the impression that we need to help everybody. So especially the people that are really in desperate need of help, we need to show up for, we need to uplift them. And he came to me with no car, no job, no money, nothing.
Oh boy.
So it was literally the perfect complement to my overgiving nature.
Yes, you're empath. We naturally attract them.
Yes, we do. Mm-hmm. And so it was, as I said, a perfect compliment. And then I just continued to feel more and more depleted. And literally, when you're in a narcissistic relationship, you feel like you're going a little crazy. You think it's just you, and they have you convinced that it's you, not them. And some friends of mine, some really amazing friends of mine, said to me, we love you so friggin' much, but we literally cannot witness this anymore. So we need to back out of our friendship. It is hurting our hearts to see the shell of a person that you're becoming, and we just can't witness it anymore. And it hit me in that moment that I'm not the only one who is seeing this. This is actually real. This is actually happening. And I was like, we're done here. We're done. And I started to take a deep dive into my work and really say, like, what was that within me that thought that was okay to give to that capacity, to give to that deep of a detriment of self? How did I find that was okay? And so for the next year, I just deep dove into my stuff and I started to really analyze everything that was in there, because I knew I was never, ever going to have that type of encounter ever again. So that was the pivoting point for me. And it just kept going and going and going. And I realized that the trauma that I was carrying with me, as I said earlier in our conversation, I was continuing to hold that in my frequency, in my field, as a belief. And so when I started to see how my beliefs that I didn't even know I believed, I didn't even know I was subscribing to them, but we grow up with these things and we take them on as true. And then we will always validate what we believe. So we will always find those narcissistic partners. We will always find the cheaters and liars, because we believe that to be true. So I started challenging every single thing I might possibly ever believe in the history of the world, and was just on this mission to see it all. And I was fascinated, because when you learn how to process that stuff, then it's fun to go in there and say, ooh, let's pick that one out too. I don't want that one anymore. I don't need this one anymore. Let's flick that one out of there. And you start to fill it in with things that feel better and much more aligned with your true soul essence. So it's been a really fascinating journey. And along the way, you had mentioned empaths. As empaths, our gifts can really, really develop within a toxic household, because we're needing to read the room to survive, to stay safe, right? So for a long time, I was holding on to my gifts as, stemming out of my trauma. And I was finally realized that my gifts came in here with me. I came in here with my gifts. My gifts, I don't need to hold the trauma to hold the gifts. it's a completely separate thing. And when I could finally see that, I was able to drop the trauma off and no longer hold on to that in my field, but just maintain who I am at my essence, which is the depth of gifts that I bring to this plane. So it's been a huge transformation in, as I said, kind of unpacking all of that stuff and really just coming into who I am as an essence and what I'm meant to do here without needing to drag everybody with me kicking and screaming, but really work with the people who are like, hey, I get it. I want that. And I'm ready. Let's do this. So it's really been a huge, huge journey.
And that's a huge thing too, is with narcissistic relationships. Of course, they make you feel like you're crazy and you're gaslit. And they have all these techniques because it comes from really a deep loathing within themselves, but they project that outwards towards you. And, it's easy to become the victim, which you do become, but everybody has a role in what they allow to show up in their lives, even though they might be, it's abuse. So you're abused and you're held down. But at a certain point, it's like, you got out of that relationship instead of being the victim. Yes, you were victimized. And there's no denying that because it is, but you took responsibility for how you allowed that. Like the healing comes within the depth of yourself. Like, how did I allow this? Why did I stay in a situation? Where was I? And then the healing from there. So you're working with people that might already recognize that there's something within themselves that that brought in these beliefs or has these beliefs that allowed them to be in that type of situation.
Yeah, that's a huge piece of the healing is, for me in particular, recognizing I was victimized was huge because I was always the one to get up, brush it off, keep going. Don't even pay attention to that. Doesn't matter. Right. But throughout that time, I was collecting all these wounds and ignoring them. Because I didn't have time to deal with that. I had to keep going. But for the first time, I really realized like, ouch, that one hurt. That one cut really deep. And I did not like that. And I'm going to look at that wound now and I'm going to see like, what do you actually need to heal? What's going on in there? How deep are you? How long standing have you been there? And start to get friendly with those parts and know that there's nothing to fear inside of yourself. It's just wounds that are needing love and nurturing. And when you can look at it that way, you're like, oh, sweet girl. It's like, okay, we can go in. I even get emotional thinking about it now, but yeah, recognizing that there is trauma and that it doesn't need to define you. It's just kind of an experience, and what can you extract from it and take that part and leave the rest, drop off the stuff that doesn't feel good. You don't need to keep carrying it with you as a reminder.
And that leads to like bypassing, not necessarily like spiritual bypassing, which a lot of people in the self-development and new age community, they just like, oh no, feel positive and all that. Right. But it's sitting with that emotion. And, as women, especially if you're taking care of your household and trying to keep peace in the house. And maybe if you have children and holding it all together and having a job, it's like I don't have time to recognize that emotion. No, this isn't right. So you're bypassing that. So it's stuck in the body. It's stuck in the emotional body. And it's just being able to sit with it and acknowledge it. And, oh, my little girl, my sweet angel, and then sitting with that, feeling that, and then allowing it to transform, because if not, it's just stuck. And then, like you said, in the field, it's stuck in your energy field. And that takes me to the quantum mechanics. I'm so fascinated with quantum energy and the quantum, and about how it's not just us as our individual physical meat suit body. We have this field around that us, which takes all of our agreements, like you said. Can you kind of explain more about that quantum energy in our field and our auric field and how it resonates out into the world and then draws that back to us?
Yeah, that's a big question. I'll do my best to simplify it because it is, it can go a lot of different directions. So
we don't have to do Stephen Hawking's.
That's right. The energy that I work with is, you have the mental body, right? And all the thoughts and the belief systems, the conscious and unconscious minds. You have the emotional body with all the triggers and all the feels. You have the energetic body, which is basically consists of those thoughts and feelings that make up your frequency. And what your frequency is sort of this signal that emits outward that then starts to interact with other things of similar frequency, right? Then you also have your spiritual body, which is your soul's evolution path, and the physical body. So I tell people anytime that you have pain of any kind, whether it's emotional pain, physical pain, mental pain, it's just stuck energy. If you think of it as everything is energy, experiences are energy, we're energy, we can flow and we can transmute and we can change things like that if we want to, and when you can start to really pay attention to the thoughts that you think and the kinds of emotions that those invoke, and then decide to think better feeling thoughts, therefore producing better feeling emotions, your frequency uplifts. You're no longer in the density. So think of it as you're in an elevator. And if you're in guilt and shame and envy and resentment and all those things, you're in the basement level. So you get out of that elevator, the only thing you can play with in that space is other things that are similar to those frequencies. Mm-hmm. It kind of sucks down there, right? It's dark, it's scary. Mm-hmm. Nobody wants to play there. So you start to elevate, you go up to like the first floor, let's say, and there's a little bit lighter feeling experiences here. So you can continue to uplift your field by simply offloading and offsetting, decongesting the old stuff. So a lot of times if someone grows up with guilt and shame, those are a lot of heavy emotions. I grew up in a very Catholic household. Guilt was a part of our daily experience, and so to look at that, in order to kind of offset all of the programming of guilt would take years. So I always say, go into the easy place, go into the access point, which is in the energy body. So when you can find the frequency of guilt in the field and you start to transmute that energy, it releases it from your system. Therefore, the programs that are attached to that frequency also start to dissolve. The emotions also start to dissolve. And so you're not carrying that around with you anymore. So for me, energy healing is a really accelerated pathway to clear the stuff out and then come back into your free will and choice much easier, because you're not trying to change through the congestion. You're not trying to see through the shrouding. You've got a clear pathway, and then you can choose which direction you want to go in. Is that helpful?
Yes, totally. That was the best breakdown.
Thank you.
Yeah. If that was a rating, it would be a G rating. If it was a movie rating, that was a G. So that was very good, because quantum mechanics makes my head it makes me just want to explode, because it's just, but it's so fascinating. It's so fascinating to see our world in a whole different way, or in the real way, you could say.
Right. Yeah.
So what would you say is one of the biggest blocks for women to let go of the old and step into the new? Or what is one of the biggest blocks to them healing their trauma and changing their energy field and changing their life?
I see a lot of women in the collective in the old programs of overgiving, people pleasing, feeling like they need to be the good girl, in the air quotes, feeling like you should be a certain way. And I always say, don't should all over yourself. Don't do that, So it's those types of programs that I'm really seeing are still active, especially in the feminine field. And the outward expression of that is, it's kind of like women are always looking outside of themselves about who to tend to, what to fix, what needs attention. And there's so much outpouring of energy that it's almost like for anything to come back in is very restricted and limited. So women that have trouble with abundance blocks, with receiving pure love, with all of these things that they're not feeling satisfied or satiated in life, typically because their channels are all flowing out. So we want to bring some channels back in. And so what happens when we start to recognize, and here's a block or a little bit of resistance that can come up when people start to change these programs, is they think, but I love to give. I want to give. I don't want to stop giving. And I'm like, you don't have to stop giving, just stop over giving. There's a very distinctive difference. When you are giving to the point where you are exhausted and it's creating a deficit in you, that's over giving. When you have the energy and you're giving to what feels comfortable for you, do that all day long as it's feeling good. But start to listen to yourself and read your signals, and your body is going to be your first line of defense. Your emotions and your physical body will tell you every single time what's too much if you're not listening. I, the past couple of years, had been experiencing chronic fatigue. And I was one of those, as I said before, I just get up and keep going. No matter what, I keep going, I keep going, I keep going. And it finally caught up to me. And it hit me really hard because I was not paying attention. I was not listening. Yes, yes. And it knocked me out. And I had to learn to, have my kids make me dinner because I could not get off the couch. I couldn't see, so I couldn't drive. I needed to rely on people to go to the store for me and things. Like, it was really hardcore learning how to receive because I clearly was not getting the message. So then when I started to feel better, I started to dive right back into my work and I would relapse. And so I went into meditation and basically got, well, you're not giving yourself permission to rest unless you don't feel good. So practice resting even when you feel good. I'm like, oh, you can do that, So it was a lot of practicing new ways of being that we just don't think about because we're so busy tending to other people and doing all kinds of things. So when you can listen to the smaller cues and learn to pivot when those come in, as opposed to getting hit with a truck to knock you on your butt, it's a much gentler way of learning these lessons, but some of us, are stubborn. So,
because it's giving you hints all along. Oh, you need to slow. No, I can't slow down. No, they need me. And then you get the 2x4 and it's going to knock you down. And then you just change the way of being, because also overgiving is a should. It's some old conditioning and programming. Like, you said you had a very Catholic background. I'm sure it's hell, fire, and brimstone. I was raised Catholic, but God is a loving God. He's a forgiving God. And even with that, I was like, some of this is hokey pokey. Yeah. So growing up with some kind of guilt or trauma is going to have you overgiving because there's something missing within yourself that feels that you won't be loved unless you do these kind of things on an unconscious level.
Right, exactly. And that's the point where those belief systems are hiding and tucked away, is in the subconscious and the unconscious minds, right? So we're consciously wanting a beautiful, loving, exchange of a relationship. But if we believe that we can't have that, or we have to prove our love, or we have to overgive in order, then that's running the show. And so a lot of people aren't aware of what's actually running the show. So it's important to really dive into those belief systems and see what actually is going on in there. And what do I like? And what do I want to just really kick to the curb?
Isn't it crazy? All the paradoxical intent, like you think one way, but then this other one is negating it, and just how we need to become stewards of our words, of our words and our thoughts and our beliefs, because we are creating our reality every day. If we don't even like, even if we don't like what's showing up for us. And it's always think about fill your own cup first, because like as a child, no, you're selfish if you're like taking care of yourself. But that's the biggest gift that you can give is taking time for yourself, filling your own cup. And then you give from the overflow to everyone else, because then you have enough to give.
Yeah. There was something really, really cool that I saw a few years ago. A client of mine was working through her overgiving programs. And as we were kind of clearing her field, what was shown to me was that when her field was satiated, that frequency reached out infinitely, touching every other woman who also carried that wound to help activate a healing. So when I saw how inner work and healing yourself can reach so much further out than overgiving in this dimension, I was like, we are done here. I'm never overgiving in this dimension, because when I fill myself and my field becomes robust, I'm changing the world by doing that. So those of you that are overgivers out there, think about how much more that your gift to self reaches when you do that inner work, as opposed to, creating a deficit in this dimension.
I love that. And I love that you could see that, because that brings me to another way that you help women and help them heal is you work with other beings, or you channel higher higher beings or on another dimension, on the quantum field and all that. Can you explain how they come to you and how you work with them in order to help somebody else?
Yeah, so I opened a channel in 2011, and I was doing a deep chakra clear meditation with myself. And I was spending, I don't know even how long on each energy center, just really acquainting myself with what's going on in there, really creating alignment and balance, and just deeply cleansing and clearing them. And I got to my throat, and in meditation, your body just starts to kind of flow and unwind and all that.
Mm-hmm.
So my head started just to kind of roll back, and my throat was really exposed and open. And I couldn't get out of that positioning. I felt like I was so out of body that I couldn't lift my head back up. And so it scared me a little bit to be that deep and so disconnected from my physical form, that I invoked Archangel Michael to come and pull me from the depth of my meditation. And within moments, I felt this massive masculine presence on my right. And I felt a hand kind of set on my cheek and push my head on his shoulder. And I sat there for a moment, completely freaked out, because I was like, I have officially lost my mind. And I was like having this dialogue with myself, you just called him and now you're freaked out that he's here and this is happening. This is really happening. And, on and on it went, until I finally settled in and thought, this is happening. He's here with me. I could feel his presence. And then when I sat back upright, I felt this massive feminine presence on my left, and she identified herself as Saint Bridget. And I didn't know who that was at the time, but I was dialoguing with her for probably 45 minutes. And after the session, really the only thing I remembered from that session, because I was so out of body still, and to come back in, I was like, I have to start writing this stuff down because I couldn't remember all the cool stuff. But the main thing I remember is her saying to me, you've been so restless your whole life because you've been searching for your connection back to us.
Oh my God.
And I was like, that makes sense, because my life had been so dark and so just full of abuse and big T traumas and little T traumas, like trauma. And of course, I had huge resistance to life for a large part of my existence here because it was just so dark. And when I found that connection back to a source of light and support and love, I was like, oh, okay, I can do this here. I can do this in this plane. So I literally spent the next complete year in meditation, just talking with them, invoking all of them, getting to know all these ascended masters, and really just getting acquainted with their energy to where I could feel their presence and know who it was. I could identify with them. And then throughout the years, I just, I kind of stopped talking to them as much. I just started channeling, visions and frequencies, and almost like film, strips that come through my mind. And I just get information that kind of drops in that is infused with all the different bodies all at once. So I can read emotional energy, say, and know exactly where it came from. If it's a different lifetime, who was involved, what happened, how is this creating a block in your field? How is it creating resistance in your life? How do we unpack it and unfold it and create space for something different? So everything kind of comes in at once. So I guess the gifts have kind of evolved as I've evolved within. And so I don't channel anymore. I feel like it's all just coming from within me and my direct connection to source. But I help other people also get in touch with that alignment within themselves, so they can understand what that feels like, and to tap into those areas that are kind of unseen or unknown for a lot of people, and how to navigate in there, because I love it in those places. I feel most like myself when I'm doing my work.
That's so beautiful. It's like they came to you, and you had said that you've been what was that again? Are you returning to us? That thing that touched me so much.
Yeah, you've been restless your whole life. Yeah, because you've been searching for your connection back to us.
Oh my God, aren't we all searching for the connection? What a beautiful experience.
Yeah, it really was.
Did you start journaling at all? Because we were talking about Paul Selig before, and about how he what does he call it? It's not tech. They call it text, and he doesn't call it channel. He calls it something else. But it's basically the same thing. But it just reminds me of that. And so at some point, I hope you take everything that you learned and channeled and put it into a book or something.
Yeah, I spent, because I couldn't remember a lot of things when I would come back in. So I literally started to journal, and I would write a question and then wait for the channel to come through. So I have journals upon journals upon journals of questions that I asked and responses from channel. And then it just became so fast that I couldn't even read my writing after a while. So then I was just like, okay, I'm ready to consciously wrap my head around it in the same time frame that it's coming in. So it integrates. So I just practiced the integration of it. And now it's just always integrating, like always integrating. So I need to, still learning how to take time away from that, because I love it so much that I'm working on just kind of playing more in this dimension without being connected and on all the time. It's an easy place for me to be.
Well, you keep yourself grounded at the same time. And that one experience where you couldn't get up, had you grounded yourself before, or it just was?
Oh yeah. I was totally grounded, but I was way up at the same time. I was very, very big in that moment. Yeah. And I've had experiences with Jesus too, where he gifted an energy to me and another girl I was mentoring, and I've gifted that energy to other people. And it's just working with them was a completely beautiful experience. So highly recommend it.
I'm ready. Come on. My morning practice, Jesus, come to me. Any of your energies. I'm ready. I'm open. I'm willing. Don't scare me though. Don't stand over my bed in the middle of the night. That's all. Yeah,
only those from love and light. Only those
from love and light are allowed here. That's for sure.
Yeah.
So that brings me also to, okay, so energetic healing, quantum healing, healing the energy body, healing old beliefs in energy and going to the source, how this differs from the modern medicine, I'm doing this air quotes, and how they seem to want to I can't say that word. Numb out, anesthetize them with anesthetize. Thank you.
Anesthetize.
You said it right.
I'm with you, girl.
How they're just, well, I call it the medical cartel, but how they're just going to put Band-Aids over any disease or a problem or mental, like, because mental illness is huge in this country and it's being addressed the wrong way. So someone like you that can go to the source and help heal them from the whole self.
Yeah.
How it's so important right now.
Yeah, I really, I see mental illness as the gifted. Because they know things, they see things in a different way and they cannot deny that within themselves. And trying to function in this place where you are supposed to be a certain way and there's expectations around you, and even start this indoctrination of schools, you have to sit in the desk and you have to sit there for 8 hours and you can't speak unless you raise your hand, and you have to wait to go to the bathroom or eat, and all these things that is so disconnected from ourselves and our needs. And we learn that as this is the right way to be, otherwise there's punishment. And so the people that I think that are undeniable about who they are as people and can't function in that sort of indoctrination, is it really creates a disconnect from self, because there tends to be this feeling like I'm broken, there's something wrong with me. And the density of those emotions can really congest someone's field. And if you think about depression, it's heavy energy depressing the field. They're carrying a lot of density because they're trying to fit into something that no one is actually meant to fit into, but they're just experiencing it at a very visceral way. And then people are trying to medicate them so they numb out, so they fit in. But it's like, let them out, let them out of the cage, let them be who they are, explore what's going on in there and who they actually are at their core, kind of activating those pieces of self back up so they can be here and make the changes that this place desperately needs. I mean, we know that we're going through this ascension process. We have been for a long time. We all feel it accelerating and speeding up, getting more intense. And so those of us that have been on path for a long time are like, yay, 2020 is finally here. We're going to make some big changes. And we get smacked with this thing. We're like, wait, what? What is this business? What is this crazy?
Yeah, I stayed home and made a vision board. I'm like, 2020 is going to be everything. I didn't even go. I think I fell asleep at 9:00. I made a vision board. I stayed home by myself. I meditated. And then WTF. I mean, come on, y'all. It had to prepare me for that.
No one could have seen it coming, but when you look at it, you're like, oh, okay. So it's
Mhm.
needed to rattle everything loose, all these structures and systems that just haven't worked for a
Mm-mm.
long time. And so now everybody is, kind of being kind of shaken loose, I guess, with really looking at what is actually working and what's not, and what do you prefer, and take some downtime, socially distance, maybe do some meditation or introspection or thinking about things, and see what comes out of that without the busyness of the have tos and the shoulds every day. So, I mean, they always say you might not get what you want, but you always get what you need.
Mhm.
This has definitely been one of those scenarios.
Oh my gosh, has it ever? Has it ever? So, there's one thing I just wanted to bring up. So there's beliefs, and then there's knowing, and then there's embodiment. Can you
Mhm.
explain the three?
Give me a little bit more about what you're looking for.
Like there's beliefs, we have beliefs, and then there's a
Mhm.
knowing where we
Mhm.
have like that intuitive knowing.
Mhm.
And then not just knowing, but embodiment, how we embody our truth.
Yeah,
You
gotcha.
know?
Yeah. So, I mean, if you think even the bodies that we talked about before, the mental body, it has a lot of ego stuff in there, and the ego is trying to keep us safe, but typically comes from a place of fear, right? So we're like, we really want to go and apply for that job, but what if we get rejected? What if, they don't like us? What if we didn't dress right or whatever? The ego's in there kind of putting, planting seeds to be careful out there, might not come, in the way that you want it to. So those thoughts are really, the mental body tends to be very active, especially if you've grown up with trauma and your thoughts are hypervigilant and you're always scanning the room to make sure you stay safe. It's kind of like feeding the fears in a way where they're not able to express as much, where you're kind of, I guess, pacifying the fears, right? With the hyper vigilant mental body. When you start to tune into your intuition more, it is more of a visceral feeling. It's that gut feeling. And there was something that I heard a long time ago, and I absolutely love it. When people are starting to get in touch with their intuition, it's kind of like we need to remove the mind from the equation.
Mm.
And so anytime that you're processing thoughts, you're in the mental body. So how do you get more into that intuitive knowing? Release the thoughts. So if you're tuning into something, is this for me? It's either a uh-huh or a uh-uh. It's primitive language. It's not the justifications. It's not the excuses. It's not all the past backstory that you're referencing. It's literally like, how does this feel? And can you practice that? And then for me, embodiment is something that has been practiced that is now a piece of you. So if like your boundaries, when you start to embody honoring of self, boundaries set themselves. You don't need to establish them. You don't need to speak them. You just are a certain way. And they're rarely challenged when you are concrete in how you are honoring yourself. You don't even it's not even a lesson you need to learn anymore. It's there. So it's the embodiment of that energy that creates your experiences. So the more you're practicing something, even let's say people are in abundance blocks and they're in lack mentality, they have practiced so much the fear and the constriction of not having enough. So it is very, very almost like solidified in their field. What if you could say, just to even enter into a different realm, wouldn't it be nice if all my bills were taken care of? Wouldn't it be nice if all of these things were just okay? Wouldn't it be nice if I could just feel comfortable in my situation? Wouldn't it be nice just opening up ever so slightly? And you could already feel a difference in your field, right?
Mhm.
Your breathing all of a sudden opens, your muscles start to soften, and you start to become that thing that you're bringing in. The more you practice it, the more it becomes embodied, and therefore the more your imprinted signal starts to shift as far as what wants to come back in. Opportunities, synchronicities, all of that stuff happens when you're embodying something that you really want to be. Does that answer your question, or did I totally go
Yes,
on a tangent?
no, that was great.
Okay. Okay.
So in asking empowering questions and instead of disempowering, and listening for and receiving the answer, and then embodiment is just you are an is, you are a being, you're being
Mhm.
all that you know, and all that, well, beliefs can be like false beliefs, but if it's the
Mhm.
knowing and being in that space of knowing.
Yes, exactly. And even, when you're tackling the false beliefs, I mean, basically, if you're listening to the experiences that you're having, you're paying attention to what the experiences you're having, you're getting information about all that stuff all the time, about the triggers, about the belief systems. Anytime that you're in a state of suffering or struggle, there is typically a limiting belief that's attached to that experience. And so when you can go in and explore what that is, and you release it, then you don't even, it's not even a part of the equation when you're embodying something anymore, because I don't think that I guess you can embody fear, but it's certainly not comfortable there. I think with embodiment, I feel like it comes with a sense of comfort or stability or balance or something,
Mm-hmm. Now, what advice would you give to somebody that might be listening and is struggling to have that knowing embodiment and or to create the reality that they really desire for themselves? What is, one or two key things that you could tell them today to begin? Besides working with you, which I'm going to lead them to.
Hire a coach, hire somebody who can
yes.
see the hidden stuff, I think is really important. But really, learning to listen and process your own world is the most important thing that we can do for ourselves and for the collective. And as I said, when you're tuning in and listening and you feel those triggers coming in, identify them as something that is not of you. As a soul essence, we are meant to experience joy and happiness and exploration and fun and all these things. We're also supposed to experience the deeper, intense feelings, but we're not supposed to stay in them. See, people attach and they stay and they marinate in the heavy stuff. You don't have to stay in it. So everything's a choice. And I think the most simple way to break this down, again, I love to share other things that I've learned along the way. And I was at a seminar and I was listening to this gentleman speak, and he said, there are two states of being: a beautiful state or a suffering state, and either is a choice. And I was like mind blown, because I thought, and at that time I was really maybe 80% of my day in a suffering state. I was overworking, I was overgiving, I was worrying about things, I was tending to other people's needs in an excessive way, I was doing all these things that kept me basically suffering. And so when you can recognize you're in a suffering state, you choose not to. Choose to stop doing the thing that you're doing that doesn't feel good. Stop thinking the thought that invokes negative emotions, that keeps you marinating in the heaviness. Stop engaging in relationships that are detrimental to your health and your mind and your body and your emotions. Kind of stop doing the things that just don't feel good. Stop creating the suffering, and choose instead a beautiful state. And what I'll say is, when you choose to stop focusing on the past and the trauma and all the things that aren't working, it's literally a perception shift. So you can just turn your head to the other direction. You start to focus on what you do want. And what happens is such a beautiful, magical experience. When you are focusing on what you want, if anything is in the way of it, it'll show up. You don't have to go looking for it. You don't have to go exploring all the things. It'll show up as an obstacle or a block. You manage it and you keep moving forward. It can be so much more simple than what we think it has to be. Just move in a direction that feels good. And if something surfaces, know it's an opportunity to heal something, to heal a wound that's surfacing. It just wants some love and attention. That's all it needs. And keep moving forward. Doesn't that feel so much better and manageable?
So much better. Yes. Yes. And it's so simple, but it's, it's a practice, because a lot of change is simple, but it's all our old beliefs and our old condition. And it almost is comfort staying in the old. And it's just like choices. Is this in love or is this in fear? You're either in love or in fear, and those two things. And that's something else that you can think of to make that choice to move in the other direction.
Yeah. Those two cannot coexist.
No,
they just can't. So pick one.
Pick one. I choose love.
That's right.
That's going to be my mantra today. Well, it's been so lovely having you on, and I would love for my audience to know how to find you and how to work with you.
Yeah, I offer several different options to work with me. I love my private practice. I get in deep with people to see exactly what is blocking them, energy stagnations, old past wounds, programs, past life experiences, whatever kind of comes up in their field, we go in and we heal. to really accelerate the process of them being in a completely different state of being a couple of months from now. So I love that accelerated work. I also offer a group coaching program, which it's called Elevate. I'm starting a new session in February. So that takes people through as a group experience, trying to elevate their field and their frequency and how to live an elevated life, releasing the old. And then I also have an online course for people who like to learn more via self-study that walks them through how to identify triggers, how to identify limiting beliefs. What do you do when you have these things that come up? How do you manage them? So it kind of breaks all of that system down for people as well. But all of those ways can be found on my website at jeanatman.com.
Great. I'll put that in the show notes. And I just have to comment, you are radiating. This woman is in her divine purpose, and she's doing what she loves and what she's been brought here to do. So I really encourage you to seek her out and work with Jean. And 2 more questions before we go. What is lighting you up right now? What do you have any new projects or anything in your personal life or?
Yeah, I'm pretty much lit up all the time.
I can see that. You came right on all lit.
Yeah.
You're like my sister from another mister.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, I just started working with a new business coach, which I'm really excited about, kind of helping me to go to the next level with my business, because I feel like I just continue to want to reach more people and continue this up-leveling process of humanity. I'm refining my mission, of course, because I don't want to go into burnout, but I'm finding ways to work smarter, not harder. And so it's a personal evolution, as well as being able to reach more people in the process. So I'm very excited to evolve into more of my potential, I guess. So that's got me pretty inspired right now. And of course, whenever I learn something new about myself, my personal journey, that also adds more tools to my tool belt for how I can help others. So it's kind of dual purpose right now, which, those having both those bases covered right now is just such a beautiful thing for me.
It's always a learning process, right?
Yeah.
And I like how you're saying to work smarter, not harder, because then you can reach more people and you have more energy to give.
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
It's all about the energy.
Absolutely. And one last question before we wrap up. I always like to ask my guests this last thing is, what does it mean for you to live with an awakened heart?
I feel like an awakened heart is an open heart. I feel like there's so many people that have been betrayed and hurt and, experienced trauma, that they live in sort of this place where it's just kind of like a closed heart space. It's hard to give or receive in that space. And for me, I think to have, sort of an openness to people and to vibrate with similar beings that, are safe and uplifting, it's just such a expanded experience, I suppose. So I encourage you, the people that do feel safe and beautiful in your life, see if you can open your heart just a little bit more and see how that depth can affect your experience, because it's pretty beautiful when you get into that state.
An open, expansive state. So you could just stand there, open your arms and your chest to the sky, and I am here, I am here, I am here, from Paul Selig. That's been my mantra. Yeah.
I love it.
Yes. Jean, it was so wonderful having you on, and I honor you. I thank you for all that you're doing for the world, for women, and you're up-leveling. You're up-leveling 100%. I don't know where that came from.
Yeah, I love it. I appreciate being here with you today and being able to speak to your audience too. So thanks so much for having me.
Thank you.